When I say the word narcissist, you almost certainly picture someone loud, boastful, and just, constantly demanding the spotlight.
Right, the classic exhibitionist type.
Exactly. You think of the coworker who talks over everyone in meetings, or maybe that ex who truly thought they were the center of the universe.
Hmm.
But what if I told you the most psychologically destructive narcissist in your life, the one who leaves you doubting your own sanity, might actually be the person who acts painfully shy, constantly plays the victim, and seems, well, crippled by self-doubt?
It is a terrifying thought, but it is incredibly common. We are just so profoundly conditioned by pop culture to look for the loud monster that we completely leave our front doors wide open for the quiet one.
Yeah, we totally miss it.
We do. The clinical, trauma-informed reality of pathological narcissism, it goes so far beyond arrogance. It is actually a highly sophisticated system of reality distortion. And honestly, the quiet, covert manifestations of it often cause the most severe neurological and psychological damage to the people who get caught in their orbit.
And that is exactly the paradox we are unpacking in this deep dive today. Our mission here is to completely dismantle your preconceived notions about emotional abuse. We are going deep into the clinical taxonomy of covert narcissism, the systemic manipulation in these toxic dynamics, and most importantly, the actual neuroscience of why it is so incredibly difficult to walk away.
Yeah, and we have a massive stack of psychiatric manuals, trauma studies, and behavioral science research to get through. But we are going to move entirely beyond the pop psychology buzzwords. We really need to look at the neurobiological realities here.
Right, because it's not just about labeling bad behavior.
Exactly. But I want to make something very clear right at the start. This journey isn't just about analyzing the abuser. That is really only half the equation. The far more important half is you, the listener.
That is such a vital point.
We are going to decode your own nervous system's response to this kind of psychological manipulation. We want to explore why your body reacts the way it does when you are caught in this web and, well, why your own empathy is usually the primary tool being weaponized against you.
Oh, wow. So your own best qualities are used against you. Before this deep dive is over, you will understand the hidden emotional needs driving this toxic behavior, the unconscious psychological mechanisms at play, and exactly why your own mind might actually defend the person who is actively harming you.
Which is such a confusing experience for people to go through.
It really is. The goal here is to help you see the pattern, because learning to trust your own memory again is truly the ultimate act of rebellion.
To truly understand how this covert manipulation operates in your daily life, we really have to start by traveling back to the genesis of the disorder. We have to look at the empty, fragmented core of the narcissistic personality.
I feel like whenever people discuss the origin of narcissism, they always point to the Greek myth of Narcissus, the beautiful hunter who saw his reflection in a pool of water, fell in love with himself, and just refused to leave until he died.
Yes, that is the classic reference point.
But the cultural takeaway is always that narcissism means loving yourself too much. And looking at the clinical data we have here, that popular interpretation seems to just completely miss the point of the tragedy.
It entirely misses the point. It really does. If you read Ovid's original myth through a psychological lens, the tragedy wasn't that Narcissus loved himself. The tragedy was that he was completely unable to unite with his beloved reflection.
Wait, because it was just water.
Exactly. He was staring at a mirage, a two-dimensional image on the surface of the water, and because he couldn't actually connect with it, he couldn't draw any real sustenance from it. So he ultimately starved to death, wasting away while fixated on an empty image.
He didn't love himself at all. He was obsessed with an illusion because he had no true internal self to love.
That is exactly it. And that brings us directly to the clinical reality of what we call the narcissistic core. The pioneering psychoanalysts who built the unified theoretical frameworks on this, figures like Otto Kernberg and Heinz Kohut, they made this distinction incredibly clear.
Right, they really shifted the paradigm.
They did. They showed that narcissism is not an excess of self-love. Not at all. It is a pathological defense mechanism against profound shame, pervasive envy, and a terrifying deep-seated feeling of powerlessness.
So what is actually happening in the origin story of a person who develops this pathology? If they are building this elaborate defense mechanism, what are they defending against?
Well, it generally traces back to early childhood and a concept in developmental psychology known as attachment trauma. So for a child to develop a healthy, integrated sense of self, they require what clinicians call a good enough mother-child symbiosis.
A good enough symbiosis. What does that look like in practice?
It means having a primary caregiver who can accurately mirror the child's emotions, provide unconditional love, and this is key help the child regulate their developing nervous system. When a child is upset, the caregiver soothes them, literally teaching the child's brain how to return to a baseline of safety. Pathological narcissism often stems from early environments where this critical symbiosis is just fundamentally ruptured.
Okay, when we talk about a ruptured environment, my mind immediately goes to, like, obvious physical neglect or severe abuse. Is that always the case?
You would think so, but no. It can be obvious neglect, like a cold, indifferent parenting style where the child feels invisible and their emotional needs are consistently ignored. However, trauma research shows it frequently stems from something far more insidious:
What's that?
conditional praise. This occurs when a child is valued exclusively for what they achieve, how they look, or what they represent to the parent's own ego rather than who they inherently are.
So the child essentially becomes a trophy.
Precisely. The child learns very early on, I am only acceptable, I only receive love if I am perfect, or if I win the spelling bee, or if I make my family look good to the neighbors. The authentic self, the child who gets scared, who makes mistakes, who just wants to play, that self is rejected or shamed.
That is heartbreaking. How does a developing brain even survive that? What is the unconscious psychological mechanism that takes over when a child realizes their true self is unlovable?
It is a matter of pure psychological survival. The child experiences chronic, agonizing frustration in their reciprocal interactions with the caregiver. Because it is simply too painful for a child to constantly seek authentic connection and be repeatedly rejected or just used as a prop, the psyche does something tragic but brilliant for survival.
It builds a shield.
Exactly. It turns entirely inward. The child literally abandons the self as subject. That is the vulnerable, authentic, relating part of themselves. And in its place, they construct a grandiose self as object. They build a protective, idealized, fictional mask to present to the world. They become the image in the water.
Let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Are you saying that beneath the arrogance of the loud narcissist, or even beneath the constant weeping victimhood of the quiet narcissist, there's actually no solid integrated identity at all?
The clinical literature is unanimous on this point. The core is an unstable, fragmented self. It is literally a void that requires constant external regulation just to keep from collapsing in on itself.
It makes me think of a skyscraper, like a massive building with a magnificent mirrored glass facade. From the outside, it looks imposing, impenetrable, and perfectly constructed. It reflects the sky beautifully.
Right, an amazing exterior.
But if you were to actually walk through the front doors, you'd find there is no furniture, there are no floors, there are no interior walls. There is just an empty, echoing void and a crumbling foundation.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. It really is. And if you follow the logic of that skyscraper analogy, because there is no interior structural integrity, that mirrored facade is incredibly fragile.
Because there's nothing backing it up.
Exactly. A normal building can withstand a storm because of its internal steel framing. The narcissist's building cannot. Therefore, it requires constant maintenance and reinforcement from the outside. The narcissist relies entirely on the people around them to regulate their self-esteem.
Which reveals a deeply tragic lesson for anyone who finds themselves caught in a relationship with a person like this.
It does. It is the realization that a pathological narcissist is structurally incapable of recognizing you as a separate, fully realized human being with your own needs, your own pain, and your own autonomy. To the narcissist, you do not exist as a distinct person.
Wow. You just don't exist to them in that way.
No. You only exist as a mirror to reflect back their worth. You are an instrument used to regulate their fragile self-esteem. In the clinical sense, you become an appliance.
An appliance.
Yeah.
That is a chilling word to use for a human being. I mean, you plug a toaster in when you need toast and you unplug it and ignore it when you don't. You definitely don't care how the toaster feels about making the toast.
And if the toaster stops working exactly the way you want it to, you get angry and hit it, or you just throw it away and buy a new one. That is the actual internal object relations reality of the narcissistic mind.
That is terrifying. So if the core wound is exactly the same for all of them, this empty, fragmented skyscraper desperately needing external validation, why do they look so radically different on the surface? Why do we have the loud bragging ones taking over the boardroom and the quiet sulking ones crying in the break room?
That is a great question.
If we move from the internal void to the external masks, How does modern psychiatry categorize these behaviors?
To understand the different masks, we really have to look at the diagnostic manuals, specifically the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. For anyone unfamiliar, these are the global psychiatric rulebooks used by clinicians to diagnose mental health conditions. Historically, the DSM focused heavily on the loud, grandiose presentation.
Right, the stereotypical narcissist.
Yes, but modern iterations, and particularly the ICD-11, they look at personality functioning through a much more nuanced lens. They measure impairments in empathy and intimacy alongside specific pathological traits.
What are those specific traits? How does the ICD-11 map this out for a clinician?
Well, it uses dimensional trait domains, so it looks at a person's behavior across several spectrums. For narcissism, it looks at dissociality, which covers self-centeredness and a profound lack of empathy. Then there is negative affectivity, which includes emotional vulnerability, depression, and reactive anger.
Okay, so that's where the emotional volatility comes in.
Exactly. And finally, an ancasia, which relates to rigid perfectionism and control. So depending on how these specific traits blend together in an individual, you get radically different phenotypic presentations.
A phenotype being the mask they wear.
Essentially, yes. A phenotype is simply the observable characteristics of an individual resulting from the interaction of their internal pathology with their environment. In other words, the specific mask they have learned works best for them.
Let's compare these masks, starting with the one society knows very well, the overt or grandiose narcissist.
The overt is the classic exhibitionist. Their mask is built on dominance, contempt, and taking up maximum space. They manipulate through fear, intimidation, and raw power. Their entitlement is entirely front-facing.
So they don't hide it at all.
Not even a little. If they don't get the special treatment they believe they deserve, they display visible, aggressive rage.
Then we have a mask that is completely different, but honestly equally destructive. Communal narcissist.
Oh, the communal narcissist. They are the savior. They seek their narcissistic supply, that external validation we talked about, through performative altruism. Their hidden emotional need isn't to be seen as the smartest person in the room or the richest. Their hidden emotional need is to be seen as the most morally superior person on the planet.
They want to be viewed as a living saint.
Exactly. And the paradox of the communal narcissist is truly terrifying for their families. They will lavish strangers with charity, they will volunteer to run every single committee at their church or school, and they will post endlessly on social media about their activism.
But behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors, they will emotionally starve their closest friends, their partners, and their children. Their generosity is entirely transactional. It is designed exclusively to buy an impenetrable public reputation, which they then use as a shield against any criticism from their actual family.
That is so insidious.
Yeah.
So if a child of a communal narcissist complains about neglect,
The community responds, "How can you possibly say that? Your mother is a saint who helps everyone."
wow, which leaves the victim feeling completely crazy. And that leads us directly to the central focus of our deep dive today. The mask that is perhaps the most difficult to identify when you are standing right in front of it, the covert narcissist. I know the clinical literature sometimes refers to this as vulnerable or closet narcissism.
Yes. The covert narcissist is characterized by extreme introversion, intense hypersensitivity to any perceived criticism, and high neuroticism. Instead of boasting about their greatness, they present as self-effacing, anxious, and deeply chronically wounded.
I have to push back here for a second because this is the exact point where cognitive dissonance begins for so many victims. If I have a friend or a partner who is constantly putting themselves down, acting incredibly insecure, and talking about how terrible they are, how on earth is that narcissism? Isn't the defining feature of narcissism a belief that you are the greatest?
I'm so glad you asked that, because that is the ultimate paradox of covert entitlement. You have to look past the words they are saying and look at the hidden emotional need and the unconscious psychological mechanism at play.
Okay, unpack that for me.
For the covert narcissist, self-deprecation is not a symptom of genuine humility or authentic low self-esteem. Not at all. It is a highly sophisticated, incredibly effective manipulation tactic designed to extract emotional labor from you.
Extract emotional labor. How does that actually play out in real time in a normal conversation?
It operates on a framework we can call superiority through suffering. The covert narcissist fundamentally believes they're uniquely misunderstood. They believe the world has unfairly overlooked their quiet, sensitive brilliance.
So they still think they are special, just tragically special.
Exactly. When they put themselves down, they are not looking to connect over shared human flaws. They are issuing a demand. They are demanding that you drop whatever you are doing, correct their self-deprecation, and offer them excessive praise and validation.
Let me see if I grasp the mechanics of this. If a friend says, "Oh, I'm just so stupid, I ruin everything I touch," they aren't looking for me to, "Hey, we all make mistakes, don't be so hard on yourself."
No, if you say that, they will be furious.
So they are setting a trap where I am forced to say, "No, you're brilliant. You're the best person I know. We couldn't survive without you."
Exactly that. You are required to serve as the mirror that props up the collapsing skyscraper. And what happens if you fail to provide that excessive validation? What if you are tired and simply say, yeah, that was a mistake, but we can fix it? Or worse, what if you just quietly agree with their self-assessment?
I'm guessing it doesn't go well.
The covert narcissist will instantly punish you. They will deploy passive aggression, give you the silent treatment for days, or harbor a deep, simmering resentment. They use their vulnerability as a weapon to completely control the emotional climate of the relationship. You are always walking on eggshells, trying to ensure their fragile ego doesn't shatter.
It sounds utterly exhausting. Let's look at how this weaponized vulnerability affects victims in daily life, especially when it comes to shared responsibilities. One term that dominates the clinical research on covert dynamics is weaponized incompetence.
Weaponized incompetence is a hallmark covert tactic. Think about their hidden emotional need. They feel entitled to not have to do the mundane, boring work of daily life. But because their mask is one of a sensitive, anxious victim, they cannot openly demand that you act as their servant the way a grandiose narcissist would.
So what do they do instead?
Instead, they simply perform shared tasks incredibly poorly.
Give me a concrete scenario of how this destroys a relationship over time.
Okay, imagine you are planning an anniversary trip. A healthy partner shares the load. The covert narcissist doesn't want to do the work, but they want to seem like they are trying. So they volunteer to book the flights. Days go by, you ask about the flights, they suddenly become overwhelmed, anxious, and say the website is too confusing.
So they delay it.
Yes, and then they finally do it, but they book the wrong dates, or they book a flight with 3 layovers that cost twice as much. When you get upset, they instantly collapse into the victim role. They say, I told you I'm terrible at this, I just wanted to help, and now you're yelling at me, I can never do anything right.
Wow. So the victim is suddenly in a position where not only do they have to fix the ruined flights, but they also have to comfort the person who ruined them.
That is the extraction of emotional labor. The narcissist shifts the entire burden of accountability onto you. They know that if they do a task poorly enough and act helpless enough, you will eventually just take over the burden out of sheer exhaustion.
It's a brilliant, terrible strategy.
It is. They get to avoid the work, they get to maintain their victim stance, and they get to subtly reinforce the idea that you are the controlling, demanding one who is just so much better at these things.
The psychological toll of that is maddening. And it goes deeper than just chores or booking flights, doesn't it? The research points to a quiet, chronic envy that defines the covert narcissist.
Envy is the absolute lifeblood of covert narcissism. It really is. If you are friends with an overt narcissist and you get a promotion at work, they might directly compete with you or openly insult your new title to put you in your place. A covert narcissist cannot do that. Open hostility would break their carefully constructed mask of the supportive, sensitive friend. So they harbor a hidden, toxic envy.
Because in their empty core, they genuinely believe the universe owes them the success you just achieved.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture of their fragmented self, your success is not celebrated by them. It is processed by their nervous system as a direct existential threat to their fragile ego. If you succeed, if you are happy, it means they are failing.
A zero-sum game.
Entirely. Their internal logic dictates that there is a finite amount of happiness in the world, and you just stole their portion.
How does that hidden envy manifest? Like, what does the victim actually experience day to day?
You experience incredibly subtle sabotage. You get backhanded compliments that leave you feeling slightly sick to your stomach, though you can't articulate why. You might experience a sudden, unexplained withdrawal of affection right when you enter a healthy, new romantic relationship.
Just to dim your light a little bit.
Exactly. If you share good news, they will immediately pivot the conversation to a mysterious illness they are suffering from or a crisis they are having, forcing the spotlight back onto their suffering. They will rain on your parade so subtly, so quietly, that you feel crazy for even noticing it.
Which brings us to the most critical phase of this dynamic, We've mapped out the abuser's tactics, the masks, the weaponized incompetence, the constant pity plays. But how does this covert manipulation actually alter the victim's brain chemistry? How does it fundamentally destroy a person's perception of reality?
To understand the damage, we must move away from the abuser's internal world and step fully into the victim's internal experience. The defining, inescapable feature of a victim's experience in a covert narcissistic relationship is profound, paralyzing cognitive dissonance.
The concept of cognitive dissonance was pioneered by social psychologist Leon Festinger back in 1957. He defined it as the intense psychological agony of holding two contradictory beliefs or values at the exact same time.
The classic example in these toxic relationships is the victim's brain desperately trying to hold the belief, I deeply love this person, and they are fundamentally a good, sensitive person, alongside the undeniable daily evidence of, this person is consistently lying to me, manipulating me, draining me, and destroying my mental health.
Festinger's research noted that the human mind literally cannot tolerate that level of contradiction. It causes actual, measurable psychological distress. The brain feels like it is on fire. So the mind actively, sometimes unconsciously, works to reduce the dissonance by altering one of the beliefs.
Right. But in the context of covert narcissistic abuse, this general psychological dissonance is weaponized and multiplied exponentially. Dr. Robin Stern, the associate director on the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, outlines this brilliantly in her research on the gaslight effect. In covert abuse, the dissonance isn't just about the abuser's behavior. It becomes a nested set of Russian dolls that attacks the victim's very ability to perceive reality.
I've heard clinicians refer to this as an attack on the victim's epistemic foundation. Now, for someone who isn't a philosophy or psychology student, what does that actually mean?
Your epistemic foundation is your trust in your own mind. It is your foundational belief that your memory, your senses, and your judgment are reliable tools for perceiving the truth of the world around you. Gaslighting doesn't just make you doubt a single isolated fact like whether a specific argument happened on Tuesday or Wednesday. Over time, it systematically dismantles that foundation.
Or so they keep chipping away at it.
Exactly. The covert narcissist constantly tells you that your memory is flawed, that you are too sensitive, that you are entirely misinterpreting their innocent intentions.
So the dissonance shifts from "did they hurt me" to a much darker place. The victim starts thinking, I think they hurt me, but maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Maybe I am too sensitive, just like they say. Maybe my version of reality is inherently flawed. And if I can't trust my own memory, then maybe their version, where they are the loving victim and I am the unreasonable aggressor, is the real truth.
Exactly. When your trust in your own perception is completely undermined, the version of reality that requires you to trust yourself the most, the version that says I am being emotionally abused, feels the least credible. You don't just doubt the abuser, you begin to doubt your own doubting of the abuser. You lose yourself entirely.
It is a total hijacking of a person's reality. But a question I hear constantly from people looking at these dynamics from the outside is, why does the pattern repeat? Why does someone stay in a dynamic that is so clearly causing them psychological agony? Because this isn't just a cognitive error, is it? This is neurobiology. We have to dive into the mechanics of the trauma bond.
The trauma bond is the invisible chain that keeps the victim anchored to the abuser. And it is formed through a behavioral conditioning mechanism called intermittent reinforcement. This is absolutely crucial to understand. The abuser is not abusive 100% of the time.
Right. If someone punched you in the face on the first date, you would never go on a second date.
Exactly. The threat is obvious, and the brain's survival instinct says to run. But in a covert dynamic, they subject you to wildly unpredictable shifts. You experience extreme warmth, intense vulnerability, and intense love bombing, where they make you feel like you are the only person who has ever truly understood them. And then, suddenly and without warning, they shift to passive aggression, cold withdrawal, and devaluation. This unpredictability completely hijacks the nervous system's reward circuitry.
It operates exactly like a slot machine at a casino. You keep pulling the lever because you remember the massive jackpot you won at the very beginning of the relationship. Even though you are currently losing all your money, or in this case, your sanity and your self-worth, the intermittent, unpredictable payout keeps you hooked.
Let's look at the actual endocrinology of what is happening in the victim's body when that happens. During the devaluation phase, the silent treatment, the subtle put-downs, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. You are in a prolonged state of high distress and anxiety. Your fight-or-flight system is fully activated.
You're just steeped in stress hormones.
Yes. But then, the abuser suddenly acts loving and vulnerable again. They apologize, or they just act like nothing happened at all. When they do this, your brain is suddenly flooded with dopamine and oxytocin, the bonding hormones.
The relief washes over you.
And that relief is physically addictive. Over time, your body becomes biologically conditioned to seek relief, soothing, and safety from the exact same person who is causing the terror and distress.
The abuser becomes your biological savior. The cause of the pain and the cure for the pain are the same person.
The attachment itself becomes a psychological survival strategy. Your nervous system learns that the only way to stop the agonizing withdrawal is to get another hit of validation from the narcissist.
How does this intense cocktail of cognitive dissonance and trauma bonding physically express itself in the victim's daily behavior? The clinical model developed by therapist Annie Wright identifies 4 distinct behavioral expressions of dissonance. I want us to walk through these slowly because for anyone listening who is trapped in this cycle, this is where the veil might finally lift. The first expression she outlines is defending.
Defending is when you find yourself spontaneously generating internal arguments to protect the abuser's image. You might be driving to work completely alone, and you are making mental lists of why your partner is actually a good person. You focus heavily on their childhood trauma to excuse their cruelty, or you find yourself constantly explaining away their bad behavior to your friends and family.
You become a defense attorney in your own head, constantly arguing their case even when they aren't in the room to hear it.
This isn't conscious loyalty. This is your mind desperately trying to resolve the intolerable contradiction of the cognitive dissonance. Your brain sides with the attachment figure because losing the attachment feels to your primal nervous system like a literal threat to your physical survival.
The second behavioral expression is minimizing.
Minimizing is the act of shrinking the impact of the abuse to make it tolerable to live with. It sounds like saying, oh, it was just a joke, I shouldn't be so sensitive, or he only acts like that when he's really stressed at work. Or the most dangerous one, at least she doesn't hit me.
So you're lowering the bar to the floor.
Yes. You reduce the scale of the psychological harm so it fits neatly alongside your biological compulsion to stay in the relationship.
The third expression is returning.
This occurs when you have mustered the strength to leave or set a hard boundary, but then you go back. When you leave a trauma bond, the cognitive dissonance actually peaks. The liminal tension is agonizing. You are caught between the logical thought, I know I had to leave to survive, and the biological reality of excruciating withdrawal where you miss the illusion of who they were.
And going back fixes the withdrawal.
Exactly. Returning to the abuser is simply the mind's way of eliminating that agonizing tension. It feels like love and it feels like forgiveness, but it is often just a dysregulated nervous system reaching for immediate resolution.
And the fourth, and perhaps most baffling expression to outsiders is forgetting.
Forgetting is the mind's ultimate, most extreme survival mechanism. It is the literal erasing or severe blunting of the memories of the bad behavior in order to preserve the attachment. You might have a horrific, manipulative, emotionally violent argument on Tuesday night, but you wake up on Wednesday morning and your brain just sort of wipes the slate clean.
It's gone.
You make breakfast together as if nothing happened because remembering the trauma of Tuesday night makes it impossible to function on Wednesday morning.
If you are listening to this right now and you recognize your own behavior in these 4 categories, if you find yourself constantly defending them, minimizing the pain, returning to the chaos, or magically forgetting the abuse just to keep the peace, I want you to hear this next revelation very clearly.
If you are doing these things, you are not weak. You are not stupid. You are not lacking in willpower. And this is absolutely not a character flaw. It is a highly predictable, biologically sound nervous system response to a highly unpredictable and dangerous environment. Your mind and your body are simply doing whatever they have to do to help you survive the psychological warfare.
Understanding that is incredibly validating. But it also raises a massive question regarding recovery. If you realize you are trapped in cognitive dissonance and you see the trauma bond for what it is, can you just logically think your way out of it? Can you write a really long, detailed list of all the terrible things they did, read it every day, and finally break the spell?
The clinical answer is no. And this is exactly where so many intelligent, highly capable, highly analytical people get stuck. You cannot rationalize your way out of cognitive dissonance because it is not primarily a cognitive problem.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. The trauma does not live in the prefrontal cortex where your logic resides. The trauma lives in the body. It is deeply encoded in your nervous system's survival architecture.
So adding more logic to a trauma bond is like trying to fix a broken bone by reading a math textbook.
That is a perfect analogy. The cognitive understanding, listening to deep dives like this one, is essential for clarity, but it does not close the biological dissonance. Recovery requires somatic regulation. It requires nervous system work to teach your body that it is safe without the abuser. This involves modalities like breathwork, somatic experiencing, and EMDR.
Just to clarify for our listeners, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a psychotherapy treatment designed to alleviate the distress associated with traumatic memories by using bilateral stimulation, like eye movements, to help the brain reprocess the trauma.
Exactly. It helps discharge the physiological activation trapped in the body. And beyond the somatic work, recovery requires immense, profound grief work. You have to grieve the relationship you believed you had, and you have to accept the devastating reality that the person you loved was an illusion.
And that grief process is severely compounded by the fact that this abuse does not happen in a vacuum between two people. The moment you begin to heal, the moment you try to set boundaries or leave a covert narcissist, you quickly realize you aren't just fighting an internal psychological battle, you are fighting an external, highly organized social war.
This is a crucial pivot in our understanding of covert dynamics. We are moving from the internal architecture of abuse to the external social architecture. Because when the target tries to gain independence, the narcissist immediately weaponizes the surrounding community against them.
This brings us to a concept that is widely discussed in survivor communities: flying monkeys. For those who might not know, this term is borrowed straight from The Wizard of Oz. It refers to the winged monkeys who unquestioningly carried out the Wicked Witch's orders, terrorizing Dorothy on the witch's behalf. In the context of narcissistic abuse, how do we define flying monkeys?
Flying monkeys are the proxies, the third parties, that a narcissist recruits to surveil, harass, pressure, or systematically smear the target on their behalf. They extend the narcissist's reach into your life long after you have tried to create distance, block their number, or move away.
What is the underlying psychological mechanism driving this behavior? Why can't the narcissist just confront the victim directly?
The mechanism is called triangulation. Triangulation is the act of introducing a third person into a two-person dynamic in order to maintain control. The narcissist uses this third party to create jealousy, to apply social pressure, or, most importantly, to control the public narrative without ever having to engage in direct, accountable confrontation with you.
It is like playing a high-stakes game of chess. But your opponent has secretly convinced all of your own pieces, your knights, your rooks, your bishops, to turn around and attack your king. You're fighting a war on a board that is entirely rigged.
And the most devastating part is that the narcissist has been rigging that board for years, long before you ever realized you were playing a game.
How does that recruitment process actually work? Because these flying monkeys aren't random strangers hired off the street. They're your mutual friends. They're your coworkers, your neighbors, your in-laws, and sometimes even your own parents. How does the covert narcissist convince the people who love you to turn on you?
The recruitment happens in two distinct phases. The first phase is impression management, and it takes place over years, sometimes decades. The covert narcissist spends immense energy building a highly curated, deeply sympathetic public persona. They establish themselves as the perfect, devoted partner, the selflessly giving friend, or the easygoing, sensitive coworker.
They seem so wonderful to everyone else.
Exactly. They lay this groundwork meticulously, so the community is already primed to view them as harmless and benevolent long before any conflict ever arises.
They build a reservoir of goodwill that they intend to cash in later.
Precisely. Once you attempt to set a boundary, phase 2 begins. The pity play. The covert narcissist strikes preemptively. They do not go to your mutual friends acting angry or controlling. Instead, they go to your friends playing the abandoned, heartbroken, deeply confused victim. They manufacture a narrative where your attempt to protect yourself is framed as you being unstable, cruel, irrational, or mentally unwell.
They use their manufactured vulnerability to manipulate deeply empathetic people into doing their dirty work.
This brings us to the two primary types of proxies you will face in this social warfare. First, we have the unwitting flying monkey.
From the accounts I've read, these are often the hardest to deal with emotionally.
They are, because they are genuinely well-meaning people. They are your friends who care about both of you, but they have been entirely deceived by the narcissist's false narrative. Imagine a scenario where you finally leave an emotionally abusive partner. The next day, your best friend calls you and says, "Look, I just spent an hour on the phone with him. He is just so heartbroken. He is crying. He doesn't understand what he did wrong. Can't you just sit down and talk to him? You are being a bit harsh."
The friend thinks they're being a helpful peacemaker.
But in reality, they're acting as a delivery mechanism for the abuser's control tactics, bringing the abuse right to your doorstep when you are at your most vulnerable.
And the second type of proxy.
The willing flying monkey. These are toxic participants who actually enjoy the drama, the power dynamic, and the proximity to the narcissist. They might harbor their own hidden envy, though. They actively and enthusiastically participate in the smear campaign and derive pleasure from seeing you isolated and punished.
How does this specific type of social warfare, this systemic betrayal, affect the victims?
Yeah.
The trauma must compound exponentially.
It does. There is a concept developed by trauma researcher Dr. Jennifer Freyd called betrayal blindness, which explores the profound shock and cognitive collapse a victim feels when their trusted community turns on them. The target experiences a devastating secondary loss.
The loss of their whole support system.
Yes. Not only have they lost the primary relationship with the partner or friend, but their entire social fabric fractures simultaneously.
The smear campaign is perfectly designed to discredit the victim before the victim can even articulate their own story.
And the result of this secondary trauma is often complex PTSD. The victim develops intense identity confusion and deep, profound isolation. Because the trauma isn't just that you were subjected to covert abuse behind closed doors. The trauma is that you were abused, you finally asked for help, and the world looked at the evidence and decided the abuser was the victim.
We really need to look at this through a systemic lens. Why do flying monkeys get away with this? Why do courts, HR departments, and friend groups so often side with the covert narcissist?
Society inherently privileges the narrative of the person who appears more publicly composed, calm, and emotionally persuasive. Think about the dynamic. The covert narcissist sits in the HR office or the family court mediation room perfectly calm, wiping away a single tear, playing the sad, confused victim.
While the actual victim is falling apart.
Exactly. The true victim, meanwhile, has been subjected to months or years of gaslighting. They are traumatized, they are sleep-deprived, and their nervous system is shattered. They react with completely understandable anger, panic, and desperation.
But to an outside observer, a judge, a manager, or a friend, the reactive, panicking victim looks crazy or hostile, and the calm, calculating abuser looks rational and safe.
It is a horrific psychological double bind. The covert abuse intentionally causes your dysregulation, and then your resulting dysregulation is used as tangible proof to the world that you are the unstable abuser.
So, tactically speaking, how on earth do you survive this? We've covered the internal mechanics of the fragmented self, the cognitive dissonance, and the rigged chessboard of social warfare. But what happens when you cannot just block this person and walk away? What if you share custody of a child with this person? What if they're your manager or your sibling? How do you survive when you cannot go completely no contact?
This brings us to the practical, tactical survival strategies. Many people who begin researching toxic relationships quickly discover a tool known as the gray rock method.
The premise of gray rock is essentially to become as boring, unreactive, and emotionally flat as a literal gray rock. You give short, one-word answers. You show zero emotion, whether positive or negative. The goal is to completely starve the narcissist of their supply, the emotional reactions they feed on, so they eventually get bored and look elsewhere for validation.
In theory, and in short-term interactions, gray rock is an excellent boundary-setting tool. However, in high-conflict, high-visibility scenarios, complete gray rock can actually be incredibly dangerous.
Think about the mechanics of that. What are the limits of gray rock? Why does it fail?
Let's look at the unconscious psychological trigger. What happens to a narcissist's fragmented core when you suddenly become an emotionless, impenetrable wall? It triggers their deepest, most terrifying core wound of abandonment and powerlessness.
Because they can't see themselves in you anymore.
Right. You are no longer mirroring them. You are no longer regulating their self-esteem. Often, this does not make them bored. It results in a massive escalation of reactive rage. They will push harder, create more chaos, and manufacture crises just to force a reaction out of you, to prove they still exist and still have power over you.
And there is an external systemic danger to gray rock as well, particularly in legal or professional settings.
That is the psychological paradox of gray rock. If you are communicating on a court-monitored co-parenting app that a family judge might read, or you are sitting in a mediation meeting with HR, complete emotional shutdown backfires. If you act terse, flat, and robotic, the covert narcissist will point directly to your behavior as proof to the flying monkeys and the authorities that you are the hostile, uncooperative, cold one. They will use your own self-defense mechanism as a weapon to destroy your credibility.
If gray rock triggers their abandonment wound and makes you look hostile to outsiders, What is the alternative? How do you protect yourself without giving them ammunition?
The clinical solution is a modified approach called the yellow rock method.
Let's explore yellow rock. How does it differ from gray rock in practice?
Yellow rock maintains the exact same strict emotional boundaries and the brevity of gray rock, but it intentionally layers on basic social civility, warmth, and neutral politeness. Imagine a yellow rock sitting among gray ones. It appears brighter and more inviting on the surface, but it is fundamentally just as solid, hard, and impenetrable as the gray rock.
Why is this method superior in high conflict situations?
Because it provides absolutely no emotional fuel for the narcissist to feed on. You are still not defending yourself, you are not arguing your case, and you are not showing distress, but it simultaneously removes the narcissist's ability to claim they are being mistreated. It protects you legally and socially.
And it probably feels better for the victim, too.
It does. Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, it protects highly sensitive persons, or HSPs, from the soul-crushing psychological toll of forcing themselves to be cold, terse, and robotic, which feels entirely unnatural and traumatizing to deeply empathetic people.
I want to ground this in a highly specific, practical example. Imagine a scenario where a victim shares custody with a covert narcissist. The narcissist sends a vicious, highly manipulative text message. It's 5 paragraphs long. It blames the victim for ruining their life, accuses them of alienating the children, details how much the narcissist is suffering, and then, buried at the very bottom of this massive wall of text, is a single factual question. What time is the pediatrician appointment tomorrow? How do you yellow rock a message designed to trigger you that severely?
If you were using the gray rock method, you would ignore the accusations and simply reply, 4 p.m. To you, that is setting a boundary. But the narcissist can screenshot that one-word reply, show it to a judge or a mutual friend, and say, look how cold and dismissive they are when I'm pouring my heart out.
Right, they spin it. So what's the yellow rock response?
A yellow rock response neutralizes the trap. You would reply, good morning. The pediatrician appointment is at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
The difference in the tone is striking, but the boundary remains absolute.
Notice exactly what you did in that response. You acknowledged receipt of the message politely. You completely ignore 100% of the inflammatory manipulative bait. You did not waste a single word defending yourself against the false accusations, because defending yourself validates their premise. You answered only the factual question required by your co-parenting agreement, and you closed with a pleasant, completely neutral sign-off.
It's bulletproof.
It is. The narcissist gets zero emotional supply from you, and if they take that text to a judge to complain, you look completely reasonable, collaborative, and emotionally stable.
You are effectively neutralizing the poison while maintaining your own humanity and protecting your nervous system. That is an incredibly powerful tool, and it perfectly bridges us into the final phase of our deep dive today. We have to move from tactical survival back to the deeper lesson of self-trust.
The tactical tools are necessary to stop the bleeding, but the ultimate goal is internal healing and integration.
We have been on a profound journey today. We started by looking at the empty, fragmented core of the covert narcissist, tracing it back to the ruptured symbiosis of early childhood. We explored how they construct the mask of the victim, weaponizing self-deprecation and incompetence to extract emotional labor. We exposed the rigged chessboard of triangulation and flying monkeys, and we dove into the devastating neurological reality of cognitive dissonance and trauma bonds, where your mind splinters trying to hold love and psychological terror in the same space.
Synthesizing all of this clinical data brings us to a transformative insight about the fundamental nature of recovery. Healing from overt abuse, the loud, dominant, physically intimidating kind, is fundamentally about reclaiming the power that was taken from you. You have to learn that you have agency, that you can fight back, and that you are physically safe.
But covert abuse is different.
Completely different. Healing from covert abuse is an entirely different psychological process. It is not just about reclaiming power, it is about reclaiming a reality that was systematically distorted.
Reclaiming reality.
When someone has spent years dismantling your epistemic foundation, when they have conditioned your own brain to doubt your memories, your senses, and your intuition, the deepest work of healing is learning to trust your own mind again. It requires grieving the illusion of the person you loved, actively discharging the trauma trapped in your nervous system, and coming to the profound acceptance that the agonizing confusion you felt was not a symptom of your inadequacy. It was intentionally manufactured to control you.
As we close this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over, something that builds on the hidden truths we've uncovered today.
If you are listening to this and you are currently drowning in the fog of self-doubt, wondering if maybe you really are the problem, I want to offer you a complete paradigm shift. The self-doubt you're experiencing right now is not proof that you are losing your mind. It is the ultimate, undeniable proof that you were subjected to a highly sophisticated, invisible system of reality distortion.
It's evidence of what happened to you.
Yes, your empathy, your willingness to self-reflect, your habit of giving people the benefit of the doubt, and your deep desire to see the good in others. All of these beautiful pro-social traits were identified, hijacked, and explicitly weaponized against you. But those traits are not your weakness. They are the undeniable proof of your humanity.
They targeted the good in you.
Exactly. The narcissist targeted you not because you were weak, but because you possess the very things they permanently lack: authentic empathy, internal structural integrity, and a true integrated self.
So what does this all mean for you tomorrow morning when you wake up? It means the goal of your life is no longer trying to figure out if you can finally find the perfect sequence of words to make them understand your pain. You cannot. The foundational structure of their psyche is broken, and it always has been. The goal from this moment forward is no longer trying to convince them of your reality. The goal is finally understanding and fiercely trusting yourself.